It's long.
It's Tuesday and it's long.
Yeah, Tuesday and it's long, and yeah, I'm actually working like overtime right now.
Nice.
So.
No overtime allowed, but you're working overtime.
That's the thing. Like, if archaeologists ever go through our emails, they'll all be convinced that we never worked any overtime because the only emails that ever go out about overtime are how we are no longer to work any overtime.
Very good.
Never opening the floodgates.
That's awesome. I'm straight salaried, so there is no overtime. So, but there's always more to do than time allows. So, it is what it is.
Yeah. Recently, I've just been going for the forgiveness instead of permission approach, and it's been working pretty well.
Yeah. Now, along those lines, has your company decided if there's personality types involved in overtime usage? Like, has there been any correlation to that?
Well, we did all get 16 different colored boxes that we have to sit in. So.
Oh, very good. Do they also organize your desk position by color? Like, do you get one color every 16 slots?
I wish that I could say that there's some rationale, but it's mostly just job role.
Well, I guess that's a little bit rationale.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so do we want to talk personality types?
Sure, let's talk personality types.
Okay, so welcome to the Adhocracy podcast. Today we are discussing personality types and our love-hate relationship with them. Not necessarily the personalities, but rather the boxes that we all fit in, supposedly. There's a couple of popular ones. I've taken a handful of these tests before. I've done the DISC profile. I've done the Myers-Briggs. And I've done...
Enneagram?
Yeah.
That's the real cool one.
Yeah. That's what all the cool kids are, but we already know I'm a perfect 10.
A number 10 on the Enneagram.
Yes.
And
Okay.
for those of you not in the know, the Enneagram is supposed to only have 9 profiles. So
Yes.
Jack being a 10. It's a little Enneagram joke to open the podcast.
There we go. Those in the know. Okay, so what's the scoop with personality types? My opinion, and this was even the case back when I was in college, freshly back from a Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within live seminar in Boulder, Colorado, or Colorado Springs.
Colorado?
Yeah, so it was spring, though, so no skiing or anything like that. But I would say in general, personality typing and self-help do seem to go hand in hand. And yet there's also seems to be a bit of a conflicting message in there, which is like, well, if you're an introvert, you can maybe just try harder and become better, and then you're more naturally extroverted. So I guess I've got some questions for you and curious about your opinions on this. Do you think someone who is naturally introverted can become naturally extroverted, or is that more of a brain wiring?
Oh, man, you got the nature versus nurture right there. I think that it can be both. I mean, basically, so the question is, can you move through the different boxes? Is almost what you're saying, because that's like one of the main, for Myers-Briggs, anyways. That's one of the main spectrums. There is introvert.
That's your EI right there.
Exactly.
And I test in the middle most of the times.
Yeah?
I do. I'm like an ambivert. So right out of the gate, I already feel like I'm violating the.
You're standing.
I stand on a line.
You stand on the edge of a box.
Razor's edge of a box, bound to get paper cut. Yeah. So I'm kind of the ambivert. I personally enjoy people, but I also need to recharge. So some people would say that makes me an extroverted introvert because I need to recharge, but I enjoy people, and that to me just sounds like I'm human socially fluid. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the intent behind that is to help you identify which box you sit in, so that you can help understand yourself better, and then you can help identify anything that you would want to change in your life. I think is some of the idea, but then also so you can understand how you interact with other people. And I think if you really dive into that and you make it a focus in your life, you could probably move across that spectrum from being more introverted to extroverted. But I think when it comes down to it, it's probably more nature than nurture when it comes to specifically introvert versus extrovert. That's just my feeling on it. I haven't dug into any
Yeah.
med archive articles on this or anything.
Sure. So we're kind of shooting from our hips here for tonight's episode, and that's okay. I'm totally good with running by the seat of my pants. But
I wonder
then again,
what type of box that would be.
yeah, on the there's that's part of the disc profile type of thing.
I haven't. What's the disc profile?
That's like your. I'm gonna have to look up the terms for this, but the disc one was kind of like it's more of a work type of thing, and it bucketizes you into like what's your more natural strengths within an organization. Are you more of a process type person? Are you more of like a leader type
Did
person?
someone say process?
That's right. They've got a bucket for you, Luke.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so that's so the disc profile was that. Now I was actually looking for that about a week or so ago. I was like, I wonder where that went, but the files and PDFs are long gone, and
Oh no.
of course that was many jobs ago on some corporate email thing. So of course deleted.
How many different like Enneagram has the 9? The Myers-Briggs has I think it's 16 different boxes. How many discs? How many discs are there within the disc profile? And are they like as soon as you say disc, I'm curious, is this take into account like a Venn diagram approach where you're able to kind of bounce between a couple, or how does this one work?
Yeah, so this is they have 4. They have 4 buckets. So they have the dominance category. I'm just going to be quoting from situational.com. We'll reference this just for citing our sources here.
Sure.
Points here. But so dominance, they say this style is both bold and skeptical. They typically dive into challenges produced by their environment and place a high priority on winning. They tend to be more receptive to logic, data, and analysis than they are to somebody else's gut level feel or intuition. They pursue challenges in a dynamic, assertive, self-assured manner. They can also become easily irritated with opposing viewpoints, which elicit response can be categorized as indifference, intolerance, or hostility. So that's category 1. Category 2 is influence. This person's bold and accepting, but they're more people-oriented and motivated by their connections with others. They tend to welcome others with warm and inviting manner that encourages collaboration and generates excitement. They pursue environmental challenges in an outgoing, enthusiastic, and optimistic manner. And they're also prone to keep people happy. So kind of more the people pleaser type person in here. And as a result, they may be reluctant to provide others with constructive feedback or pay adequate attention to follow through or attention to detail. This is definitely more my style. Like I'm kind of more the I like to collaborate with folks and get things going, but when it comes to like the very last follow through, that is definitely a struggle for me. I'm not the perfectionist at that level.
So this is interesting because on that one, that sounded a lot like myself too, where it's like, you like making sure that everyone's working together happily. But then the lack of follow through, I feel like
We're getting to your categories here.
Wonderful. But I mean, like, 'cause I feel like I'm the guy who like, hey, remember 3 years ago we said we were going to do that project? It's still sitting in my backlog. We haven't talked about it for 2 years.
Yep. All right. So that is that's where now we're entering the S, which is steadiness. This style is both cautious and accepting. They are highly motivated to help others maintain the stability of their environment. They excel at cooperation and are routinely described as calm or patient. They respond to challenges of their environment in a thoughtful and comparatively methodical manner, routinely providing others with empathy and support. They have a tendency to struggle with change that disrupts their routines and can be shocked, stunned, or temporarily dazed by its emergence. And I have one more category here, and then we can yak about that, which is conscientiousness. This style is both cautious and skeptical. They can best be described as detail-oriented.
Uh-oh.
And they have strong preferences for an environment defined by its stability. They enjoy opportunities to demonstrate their expertise and share the quality of their work. They're driven by logic and objective analyses. As such, they'll typically respond to disruptions in the routine by openly questioning the feasibility and viability of the proposed path forward. They have a tendency to overanalyze, but when they reach a level of comfort, they can serve as a calming source of objective support. All right.
I can see how this is definitely work oriented.
Yeah, it's very much work oriented. So, and I think too, what's kind of interesting is you'll find like a lot of managery people in either high in the D or I side of things.
So
And then like the folks that are like kind of the individual contributor role are going to be oftentimes bucketed more heavily in the other ones. And what, if I recall correctly, when they did the disc thing, it was like a percentage score. It wasn't like a you fit this box. It's kind of a matter of ratios. And I think like the Enneagram, they didn't quite have wings, but the concept was you could have multiple of those in different ratios, and they apply in different ways. Kind of what's more dominant.
Okay.
Less prescriptive though about what that means for you.
Interesting. I don't know. In that one, I saw myself in a lot of those different categories actually.
Yep.
So I can see why it would be built that way.
Yeah. So that's DISC. Of the personality types, I actually think I liked that test the best.
Yeah.
Now it's been years since I did that. It's probably been 8-9 years since I took that test. So,
oh wow.
So that's however good memory is after 9 years on those type of topics. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's talk about family members and their use of personality profiles, and perhaps why you do the things that you do, or perhaps don't.
Yeah. So yeah, I had never really heard of these until I married my wonderful wife, and her family was very big on the Myers-Briggs, and her brothers would constantly be telling me, "Oh, you're going to get along with this person because they're also an INTJ or whatever it was," and like, but you won't get along with this person so well because they're an INTB or whatever it is. And it always just irked me that it's like, I will get along with who I want to get along with, and you don't need to put me in this little box and say I can only, or I will play best with the people in the boxes next to me or whatever. So
yeah, that's fair. Now, it's kind of interesting is,
even though he was right.
Oh, that's even better.
And that's the part that I like. I would say that I have a private love and a public hate for all of these things, because there's a part of me that loves how much sense all of these make. Mm-hmm. But then when I'm the one like being okay, it's like, no, I hate this.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, I think I'm a little bit the same way. Like, I love the idea of being able to categorize things. Like, I think that just naturally fits with for me to like. I always try to build a mental model of things in the world, and if I don't have a good visual mental model of how things connect, I find concepts harder to grasp. Mm-hmm. So at least for me, like, as long as I can like kind of in my mind's eye visualize a flow for something, that helps me just rationalize something and be able to like use my predictive faculties better. What I think I also though am big on the idea of like self-determinism. And that's kind of ironic because I think so much of us is like you could have a bad health thing and that's like completely genetic. Mm-hmm. It could just be, a fluke, or it could be whatever. And so these ideas of categorizing a human mind into like 16 buckets, when we have trillions of potential connections in our brain, it seems tenuous at best to me. Mm-hmm. And the very idea that we can be like bucketize things in that way, just on that like kind of physical basis, seems, contrived. Like it's like a artificial simplification of the world. Now, in software, we say all abstractions are leaky. So like if you're going to build something like let's say you have a missile launcher and all it has is a trajectory and a button. But you lose layers of control at the top. You can't do all the little corrections along the way. But if you press that button and you point on the map where it goes, that's a very leaky abstraction. It pulls you very far away from the actual device in question. And I feel like in the same way, many of these tests are very much that. It's a leaky abstraction in a way to oversimplify another human being.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's what I don't like about it is how it does feel oversimplified at times. I mean, I think that there is a lot of... 16 is actually a fair amount, and humans do have a fair amount of similarity between each other. Mm-hmm. Something that I always found, or was thinking about this, that I find interesting is it almost points to, like, if if we were more like machines, there's like 16 boxes of machines, and so like we're each built this certain way, and we always end up landing in these same spots. So
yeah, it's kind of
like,
interesting, right? Like if you're to imagine, like, okay, who are the 5 friends I'm going to pick to hang out with, you know? And like at the end of the day, if you were to like rerun a simulation of life or something like that, it'd be interesting to see what percentage of the time you end up with those same types of friends.
Now you're talking multiverse, sir.
Multiverse, you're talking any number of possibilities in there, or that just life as a simulation type of concept.
Oh my goodness.
But I always wondered, like, you know, as a kid, I was always like, oh man, I wish I could like clone myself 5 different times. It'd be the best to be able to hang out with myself. I'm not sure that's true.
Yeah, probably not.
I think I would probably piss me off a lot. And like, just like if I had to work with myself and like deal with my own idiosyncrasies, like, cause then I'd get this complex of like, oh, well, I don't need to do that work. You can go do that work, even though the I is me in that situation, or the you is me.
That's the Calvin and Hobbes when he creates that cardboard box and all of the replicas of him come out.
Oh, I love Calvin and Hobbes. So much great. Yeah, I remember like flipping through that. I think the only one I actually had was the Sunday Afternoon. It's like a pretty big fat Calvin and Hobbes collection book.
We've got some of the collections at home, and Zach loves reading through those. But
nice.
Whenever he like has one of those moments where it's like it's character building. And then I bring up the Calvin and Hobbes, and I'm like, you know how Calvin always complains about character building?
Oh, no.
This is exactly what he's complaining about in that moment. And then he just gets, grumpy and storms off, which, it's character building.
That's what they call that, huh?
Yeah. But on the other side of my family then, my mother and her sister, got really into the Enneagram, and a lot of my family got into that. And that one I found very intriguing because it still puts people into 9 boxes, one of 9. But what I found really interesting about that one is how, depending on your mental state, it talks about how you wing into something. So if you're stressed, then this is the path you take. This is the kind of things that you engage in to help you deal with that stress. And by and large,
I found those were actually seemed pretty true. Mm-hmm. Not universally so, but there were certain aspects of, specifically, the stress response did seem to fairly accurately describe some of my traits, which I thought was cool. And so that was, it's interesting. Yeah. The Enneagram. Yeah. Let's take a look at some of the factors on Enneagram.
All I know is, and that was one where I didn't take the test for a long time, but my family was just like, oh, that's such a 6 thing. You're such a 6. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then one day I sat down and I took the test, and what do you know? I was a 6.
Yeah. And then is the Enneagram, is it specifically like a Christian one, or?
That's the impression I've gotten, but I don't know for sure. But I mean, like, as far as how they use the wings, because I think a lot of this has to do with being able to understand, like the Myers-Briggs is good, but like this one, a lot of times when you're dealing with other human beings, when things get difficult, especially in the family, is when you're under a lot of stress or under these other kind of these aspects that Myers-Briggs doesn't necessarily dig into, but the Enneagram does, where it's like, okay, I know that my mom is I don't know, mom, if you're listening, sorry, but if she's a 6, because I'm a 6, and that 6s are the best.
I got the doodlings pulled up here.
I know that when I get stressed out, I'm going to do this. And I know that if my mom gets stressed out, she's going to do the same thing. And so it can help you be like, oh, they're a 6, they're stressed. This is why they're doing that. Yep. I shouldn't necessarily take this all personally. Yeah. It's more of just them expressing themselves through this personality. And so, I don't think any of these are perfect, but it does give you a way to help you understand some of how, why you would react in a certain way, but also how to deal with other people too.
So I think the conclusion that I'm drawing out of this is if you take the Enneagram, you take the DISC, and you take the Myers-Briggs, you multiply them all together, you're starting to probably approach all the possible personality types.
What we need to do is like each of these is a different dimension.
Yeah.
So
And then,
you plot
it becomes
these
a
in a
different
3D.
one, and we could do a picture of it, and you get a pictorial of like what that actually means.
So what would that be? So because these are kind of different. That would be interesting if you could literally plot these in like 3 dimensions. You like have your disc dimension, you have your Enneagram dimension.
Yeah.
Because your disc would be like your professional life. The Enneagram would be your personal life.
Yeah, you're really your relational.
So then what would Myers-Briggs be?
That's the perfect one.
The perfect. But I mean, like, because like, there's work and personal life. Those are usually the two big breakdowns.
Myers-Briggs is kind of like, the way I describe that almost is, it feels like it is just a description of your general tendencies, but it doesn't go into as much analysis of the behavioral analysis beyond that. It's kind of like, here's your buckets. You can infer what that means, and then they have a laundry list of descriptions in there, and then this is the part that actually drives me nuts about all these, is then you pick and choose the ones that kind of seem to fit you, or that you
got to take a test.
Yeah. Well, you take a test, but I'm saying like, then you get the analysis back, and it's a couple of paragraphs often of like whatever that means for you. And it's like, oh, when Luke gets stressed, he will tend to try to control things in this way, or he'll try to overanalyze things and try to come up with all kinds of possibilities, or, something like that. Right. And it's like, that might be a way. And then you might read that and go, I like the part where it says I analyze things, because that makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing. And therefore you agree with the description a little bit. And so I think the way they write these things is almost like
playing to you.
It's playing to you, and it's like personality horoscopes.
Myers-Briggs, the personality horoscope.
Yep. So, I think there was a Scientific American article on, are these personality types worth anything? And the big summary, the part that stood out to me was take it with a grain of salt, and not all of these are scientifically validated. But then they didn't actually really point to any that were scientifically validated. And so this now may hit a sore spot for any of the psychology type people, is there's a big debate that psychology isn't science at all, because it's not grounded in physics. And so there's folks that don't like that, who are in that realm.
Yeah, but I'm an engineer, so I like that.
So no,
I do real science, okay?
Yeah, so we had a guy over, and he's an electrical engineer, and we had another guy over who is pursuing psychology. And the guy who's the electrical engineer then went to proceed into to basically let the other person know why, while they were pursuing their PhD, that they were pursuing a field of pseudoscience and not real science. The conversation went real well, but it was fun to watch.
Oh my. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, how so what would you define as an area of science? Like, how do you draw that line between science
What is
and
knowledge?
Yes, I mean well, I mean so that's an interesting question, because I mean, like what is science? Is it anything that uses a scientific process?
So I view science as, generally speaking, a process. Scientific method, of course,
Delightful.
like generating your hypothesis. Okay, let's kind of like start there. Let's run an experiment. Let's, come up with some proposal of like what we think this is going to look like, gather data, analyze it, and then like test for repeatability. So I think the claim that, say, psychology isn't grounded in physics fundamentally isn't science is a straw man in that sense. Like, it is it's kind of like an ad hominem attack. It's like, you're a jerk. And it's like, well, that might be true that I might be a jerk, but it's more interesting to be like, I make fun of people 10 times a day, and that's rude, and therefore that behavior is jerk-like, or something like that. So in that same way, I feel like that the psychology realm of where you do population level studies, or maybe you give someone a medicine and then their behavior changes, and if you sample enough folks in that way, that is scientific.
Right. And so that was something I was gonna poke at, is like, on a large scale, you could make a case that psychology is scientific because there's general trends that you can see, but then on the individual level, especially if there's someone who wants to improve or change something in their life, then that kind of puts them into this weird bucket where they're, the data shows them going in this direction, but then they want to go in a different direction, and they end up with this like winding path
perhaps
between
like
the two.
almost like an oscillating wave of like overcorrection.
So I think that you could make a case that on the large scale it is, but then on the individual level, and this kind of gets back to the question you actually first asked at the start here, is it nature versus nurture?
Yeah.
And I think that it's, you really can make a case for both, especially in psychology.
Yep.
Because if somebody really wants to change something in their life and they're really committed to it, a lot of times, I mean, I won't be able to say you're going to completely change your life, but you can definitely change the direction.
Yeah, no, there's actually, so speaking of Tony Robbins, you want to talk about the guru of self-help, change, and all that, had a recent interview. So I'm going to summarize this, and this may not be exactly accurate, but Tony Robbins had an injury. He's always been a super big, physically impressive person. He ended up having some health problems, though, as a consequence to his overproduction of certain hormones. And the doctor is basically like, you have a super high level of these hormones, and they are causing you problems, but I can tell you right now, a lot of bodybuilders would pay me thousands of dollars a month to get their levels boosted up to what yours currently are naturally. And so in that same way, like, you want to talk about someone who has very high energy level, very high natural capabilities, is almost predestined to be the type of person who could demonstrate that like rah type of enthusiasm that is absolutely contagious. Now, going back to this, what was interesting to me in this article is Tony is basically, he put out a book, and it's on, I want to get the right name of it because Tony Robbins
book.
New
Is that
book.
what you're...
Yeah, it's on health, basically. It's called Life Force is the book. But the interview is basically talking about how he's ran into health issues, and this actually led to some really interesting perspective from him. What I liked about the interview is basically he seemed to acknowledge that health problems are real, and you can't just mind over matter everything. And because I think that's a lesson that someone who has been basically building their business on this mind over matter type of, not exactly call it happy-go-lucky psychology, but basically like you...
power of positive thinking.
Amplify it by 1,000, and you're likely to make a change in your life. And I think a lot of that is true. If you really set your mind to something, you're like, I'm going to go work out. I'm going to go get physically fit. It does take a certain amount of motivation to get your butt off the couch.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. But on the flip side, if you have a real physical ailment, just thinking about it isn't going to make things better either. So it's definitely like a blend of both.
Just go sit in a sauna.
Saunas
are good for you, man.
Burn those calories.
Yeah, that's interesting. And actually, I'm thinking a bit about Jordan Peterson in this too, where he had a lot of that. I think he had the 12 rules for your life, something like that.
Yeah.
It was a book that got him a lot of acclaim, and it was very much a pick yourself up by your own bootstraps and just do the right thing. Start with the little things, and eventually you'll work yourself up to the big things, and then and that can really help get your life in order. And then he had a real, and I think he's even still dealing with it, some real health problems that have really been a big challenge for him, where he had some addictions to some kind of
There's a prescription of sorts, right?
Yeah, some prescription drug, and just had a really rough time getting off of it, specifically because it's a drug that's very difficult to get off of, regardless.
It was
of
like
your...
in the like clonazepam or something like that, right? Like an anti-seizure type of thing.
I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was interesting because he had talked about it for so long that you can pick yourself up by your bootstraps, just do the one right thing at a time, and then he hit this major health problem. and
Yep.
it really set him back.
Addicted to benzos is what the New York Post says.
Benzos, okay.
Yeah, I actually thought Jordan Peterson had a lot of really good things to say. Very eloquent speaker in a lot of ways.
Very thoughtful. Like he's very careful. He uses words very, very specifically.
Yes, very specific meaning behind what he's speaking. I actually enjoyed a lot of the 12 rules.
That's what it was.
12 rules for life.
12 rules for your life? I feel like I'll just look this up.
Yeah, I have the audiobook because I finished it. That's my form of reading books. In general,
Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life.
12 Rules for Life. Yep.
I've heard it's a very good book. I haven't.
Oh, there we go.
There's
an
the
antidote.
man.
An antidote for chaos. That was the
Antidote for Chaos.
Yeah. The 12 Rules for Life and an antidote for chaos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I found this one to be a really interesting one.
I mean, so are my impressions right on that one? That it's a book of, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, kind of work your way through. The first thing you need to do is get up and make your bed. Like that was one of the things I heard him say a few times. Because I'll watch some YouTube of him every once in a while.
Yeah.
Listen to the Joe Rogan podcast.
I'm gonna have a hard time actually articulating what was in that book. I haven't looking at it. I'm actually not totally all the way through it. So
you didn't write a book review.
I didn't write my book review, nor did I cheat right before this and get my Cliff Notes. So. So I did enjoy it though. Some of the stories in there of him talking about how he's from a really little town in Alaska, basically of just kind of how the part that stood out to me was how some folks their lives just went sideways, went down, and a handful of decisions can make the difference between basically you being a loser in life and your life making a different direction, and where you are able to kind of max out your potential.
And so these 12 rules were something to help guide you through those.
Yeah, help guide you through the kind of the challenges in life that may otherwise derail you.
So that when you come to a fork in the road, you're able to take the optimum path.
Yes, a more optimal path.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder what he would say about personality types. Because he is a
clinical
psychologist.
Maybe that'll be his next book, the 24 personality types.
24 boxes
and
for your life.
It too could be yours for only $40. So
I don't know. It would be interesting to hear from him on that because he's talked to so many different people. He would have an interesting perspective on that. I've never heard him talk about that. So that'd be interesting.
Now, have you personality tested any of the kids yet?
No, I have done the 5 love languages with them because as a dad who goes to work every day, I get to see my kids plenty, and I'm very thankful for that. But I don't spend the whole week with them, and so trying to figure out which love language works for which kid was kind of.
And those were what? Gifts, quality time,
words of affirmation, acts of love, acts of service,
yeah.
And there's one more. I've got
a touch. Yeah.
Oh yeah, physical.
Physical
so
touch,
hugs.
Yep.
What was interesting is, the eldest, he scored very highly in one category, but then, and he's 10, and then my 6-year-old, he scored evenly almost across the board in all of them. And then I didn't even try.
Do you wonder if that's like a maturity level thing?
Yes, and this is something that before I started talking to him for the test was like, this test is only good for ages 7 and up, and I was like, yeah, right, and don't box me in, and then I gave it to my 6-year-old, and he scored evenly across all. So
gotcha. Okay, yeah, that's funny. I know my oldest, she would be definitely very high on quality time. That is definitely ranks very high for her. And my youngest as well right now, but I think that's just being young in that sense. You're just craving and competing for attention. So, I mean, if I flip her over, if I don't do that in about 3 seconds, my son will have a meltdown. So, the fairness is very much observed right now.
Well, he's the youngest, so got to make sure he gets some attention.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's good because knowing that my eldest is his is words of affirmation. I'm not going to say that I've fully internalized that, and I make that, that's been a big change in my life, the way that I approach him. But it's a good reminder every once in a while to be like, okay, looks like he's having a rough time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just go spend some quality time, give him some words of affirmation.
Yeah.
Maybe help him out with something. Another one was acts of service. And so, hey, I see, you're supposed to do the dishes after dinner tonight, bud. Here, I'll drive for you, or I'll rinse or whatever. And so, it's just a good way. So, that one, I wouldn't say is a personality type, but that one is another way of putting people in boxes.
Yeah.
But again, it's a way to help you interact with them. And I think that
Yeah,
at the base,
I think the love languages book and the concepts behind that, because often that's used in more of like a marriage counseling type of context. I think that, and I'm blanking on the other one, which was another.
The one that I took Joanna and I took when we were doing premarital counseling was like, are you a Labrador, or are you like, and it had the lion, and it had the different.
Yeah, Amber's family was really big on that, being like, oh, that person's just such a retriever type of thing. Like, was like the kind of the way of describing folks, and like, oh, this I'm a lion, and so I do things this way. But like, ironically, is used also as like a justification for bad behavior too.
Oh, that's just me being a lion.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, you're actually just being rude, and you don't want to apologize. So, yeah, the one that I was thinking of, and I don't think I have the book up here.
You do have a lot of books up here.
I do have a handful up here.
Makes you look very smart.
Yes.
Which, fortunately, you are pretty smart, so you can back most of it up.
Well, I also forget a lot of it, so I think it makes me look more accomplished in my reading than I often am. But I'm a picker and a chooser when I come to reading. I'm not certainly cover to cover. I very much am like a just-in-time learner for a lot of topics.
For me, reading, for a long time, I had not. If I started a book, that had to be the next book that I finished, and I would not start a book until and then over the last year, right now I'm in the middle of 4 books, and I haven't read a single page of any of them in 6 months.
Oh, that's funny. So for me, you should talk about books here, because
I changed my personality type from being I must read one book, and now I cannot read all of them.
For me, growing up, books is an interesting experience. So we had the library. We'd walk down to it. And it wasn't a big library, but I learned the art of placing items on hold from my mother. Now, our challenge was overdue books, because it was 10 cents a day for each item that you had due over. But there wasn't a limit of how many books you could check out at once. And so the strategy in our family is, if you're learning something, you would go through the library system and identify all the books on any one given topic. It's like, if I want to learn web page design, I'm going to place all those books on the most popular languages for that, the general tools, everything in there, place them all on hold. And in about a couple of weeks, you have this massive pile of boom, like this.
Yeah.
And so we'd go hauling home these books. So I might have 20 plus pounds of books that
my goodness.
Walk up a mile, back home.
Getting a workout.
We get a workout. And, but that, I think that kind of set me up actually on a pretty good path of figuring out how to learn topics in general. But unfortunately, I have not escaped that personality trait or learning strategy, because even to this day, it's like, if I'm going to learn something, I will buy courses online. I will watch every YouTube I can find on the topic. I'll find any online courses that are not necessarily the big ones, maybe the small ones, the odd topics. I'll find the books on it. I will be scouring articles, and then I'll pretty much have mastery of that one little thing, pretty solid, and have a good perspective on it. But because I don't necessarily read something from end to end, I may miss the rationale on why X is better and maybe not do something. And so it's leads to really solid granular knowledge, but sometimes at the cost of maybe the broader picture.
So do you regularly not finish books?
Yeah.
I
also
what percentage of books do you actually finish?
Very few. Like a fiction book, I'll finish,
but
I want to know the story. Now, my wife, when she reads a fiction book, she skips to the end when she's about a quarter of the way through, reads the last chapter, and then decides if she wants to finish it.
Oh my goodness! So that's man. I remember I have only read the last page of a book once. and it was 1984.
George Orwell.
Yeah, and it was a great book, but like the very last line, if I'll just say the last line of the book here real quickly. So spoiler alert: if you don't want to know the end of 1984, stop listening now.
Or skip ahead for 15 seconds.
But he loved Big Brother. And so, okay, spoiler alert over. But basically, that one line, you know exactly what's going to happen because you see him, not liking Big Brother and pushing back against it and trying to do everything he can to get away from it the whole time. Mm-hmm. But you know how it's going to end. And it made the book, it made the read of the book just depressing, which I mean, that's the whole point of the book, but it really drew out that feeling throughout the entire read of the book instead of just having it be like a really was more of a dull feel as opposed to an acute ending.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
gotcha.
I never read the end of a book now because that one time was so traumatizing.
Yeah, I don't read to the end, nor nor if I'm looking at like a TV series, I'm just gonna grind through it. Mm-hmm. My wife will literally read the descriptions of every episode, and then she'll be like, "I'm gonna watch this or not," based on that. And I'm like, that takes away the suspense.
I have to tell Zach to not do that. I'm like, but he likes watching Camp Cretaceous.
Yeah.
And we'll watch an episode, and then he'll sit there and he'll read all of the upcoming episodes. I'm like, don't do that. You're ruining it for yourself.
Right.
And I think the light may have finally come on. He's really excited about the new Sonic 2 movie.
Oh, okay.
And the first trailer came out, and the first trailer, anytime a trailer comes out, it shows some of the big action pieces, gives a very generic feel of the movie, but doesn't give away a lot. And then the second and third trailers, they give away, if you've watched both trailers and you know them well, then you know most of the jokes in the movie. You have a good idea of all the action set pieces.
The best punchlines are delivered in the trailers.
Yes, they are. And it's like Deadpool was a great example. That movie is hilarious. And even if you'd seen the trailers, it's still hilarious. But I watched the movie. I was like, the second one specifically, and I was like, man, they put all of the good jokes in the trailer.
And you're like, well, now what?
I can go back and watch it again in a year, and I will have forgotten most of it, and it'll still be funny. But still, it's like, I don't know. So anymore, if there's a trailer that I know that I'm gonna like. The Tomorrow War was a perfect example of this. The trailers 2 minutes
That was
long.
that one you showed me, right?
Chris Pratt.
Yeah, Chris Pratt. That was such a good movie.
It was good.
I really liked that one. There was a lot that was good about that. I felt like the whole, because it was his daughter at the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
That he was saving his daughter's life, which was such a fascinating concept of how that.
Yeah, it was, and they're making more of them too. But that was a good example of the trailer opens up, it's Chris Pratt, and I'm like, yes, I like Chris Pratt. We're off to a good start, and then it's like, all right, we've got this, these people showing up and they're saying, we're from the future and we need you to come to the future and fight a war in the future. And it's like, I am sold. I don't want to watch anything else. I turned the trailer off.
Oh, yeah, that was it. That was enough to sell you. Yeah.
And when I actually watched the movie and there were aliens in it, I'm like, oh, there's aliens? This is great. This is awesome. But if I had watched the trailers, it's because I have a way of
You build it up in your head.
I literally catalog all the things that happen in. Okay, there's a winter scene. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's this big scene. There's this, and I'm sitting there watching the movie. I'm like, okay, we haven't had the winter scene yet. Yeah. Oh, so that means this isn't the end of the movie, even though it feels like it. Okay. So it gives away the big plot twist just by having a scene with snow. Yeah. And that's enough for me to know that
I totally forget it. I'm like, oh yeah, it's gonna happen.
Well, and this happened in the Sonic movie, and I can tell it happened for Zach because after he watched that the final trailer for Sonic 2, he was like, they showed a lot in that trailer. And I was like, yeah, but that's why I don't, I try to not watch trailers because it used to be that trailers were very, if you go back and watch older trailers, they were much more generic, didn't give away as much. And now it's changed a lot, and I don't know when that changed.
Do you think that's because of just the structure of the internet, how much information is available? As soon as a movie comes out, you already have your reviews of all the plot points, the highs, the lows. Do you think
I don't know.
information like there's just the directors are having to compete with that? Do you think they're trying like is it just a norm and that's just where we are today and so everyone else is doing it?
I think that the marketing teams are so desperate to make their day one money so that they can be a big worldwide blockbuster.
Yeah.
That they kick that out so that they can do that.
Interesting.
So
I was almost thinking like me being the web developer type person. It's like, nope, they're doing this just for SEO word scraping purposes.
Well, you can,
Like
yeah.
if you were to like transcript out the movie, to put all the words in there, throw like a snowy scene, and then this character says this, and all of a sudden now you have like 1,000-word type of equivalent transcript that could be used for that.
I don't know.
That little resource. So
I'm assuming that it's because if they put all the really good stuff into the trailer, then people will assume it's just the trailer, and they'll be like, "Oh, and this is just the beginning. There's the whole movie." And it's like, then you get to the movie, it's like, well, yeah, there was all the bits between all of the trailer, but it was, that was all the exciting stuff.
yeah,
So anymore, I get very careful with the trailers that I watch. Like there's certain ones where it's like, okay, I don't really care if too much is given away. Like the new Doctor Strange trailer for the Multiverse of Madness. I was like, do I want to watch the whole thing? I almost didn't finish the Jurassic World Dominion trailer, but I couldn't help myself because I'm so excited. But
okay, so in movies, character development is very much like an important part for a plot to feel like it's progressing. Whether it's in like a horror flick, a realization that you're no longer safe anywhere, right?
Yep.
Type of thing, or something along those lines. It's almost like the very concept for a movie to be a good movie requires that a person can adapt from one personality type
here it
to
is.
another. So
nice seg.
Thank you. I was working on that one in my head for a minute. Do you think that's necessary? Like, do you think our human psyche craves that change because we can't get it, or because we hope that we can?
I think it's because we hope that we can. And I mean, those are always, I literally have Samwise Gamgee's quote from the Two Towers, those are the stories that really mattered, the ones that stuck with you when, things were the worst. And then the people just continued on. And, it's a great little dialogue he has at the end of the Two Towers there. And I think that and I think that really speaks to why specifically the Lord of the Rings was so good, is you had so many characters and all of the characters went on these incredible journeys of an incredible amount of change. Samwise leaves this bashful gardener and he comes back this hero who's willing to go, kiss the girl at the bar, sweep her off her feet and marry her. Frodo, too, is like all the characters there go through so much change. Aragorn is a perfect example of that. So I think that we watch that or read that, depending on which, the books are always better. Okay, great. But we look at that and we think, if they can change, I think I can change too. And so we like that hopefulness that brings, I think.
Yeah. I think that's a key part here. One sec here. I'm going to double check we're still running on this side. We are.
Oh, did we even start?
I had that thought in the back of my head. I was like, wait, did I even hit the record button even though I said I did?
You need a big red light.
It's just disabled right now. I turn that on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm curious here I feel like to wrap this up, I think maybe bring it back to the personal is kind of a more of an interesting story. So, where do you feel like your character and your personality traits have shifted over the years, from before you're married to first having kids, and then maybe some of the challenges that have come up along the way?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, confidence for me is something that never really came easily, and something I had to develop over time. And getting married, that helps, and then getting a job, and then having people like legitimately look up to you is another big piece of that. But I think just really being able to believe in myself more, and realizing that you always look to, at work there's this guy, he's been here for 30 years and he knows everything and this, that, and the other. And then one day that person retires, and then another person like him retires. and then all of a sudden you've got someone asking you questions, and to realize that without even necessarily trying, if people are coming to you for those questions, you have now become that person in someone else's mind, and to see yourself through that other person's eyes, where it's like, okay, I need, not only is this good for me because I'm glad that I'm at that place in my life, but also to realize that, you're to see yourself through those other person's eyes, to be like, okay, I can do this. And the realization that, parenting is a perfect example of kids, and they come to you with this question, and it's like, where did you come up with that question? And they expect you to have the answer.
Right.
And it's like, they expect, the old gag of, wish these things had come with a manual, and it's like, yeah, I wish they had, because it's
and
every
some of the
situation
questions
is so
are
different.
pretty hard questions to answer too, or ones you don't necessarily have an off the cuff answer, because there's like, okay, do I give you an age appropriate question answer that may be incomplete?
You need to know their personality type for how to answer.
That certainly, I think, can help. Yeah, because if one of your kids is, say, maybe more nightmare prone, and they ask a question on a scary topic, maybe you're going to buffer that a little bit, knowing if I answer this totally honestly, or that it's a game of probabilities or something like that, that's going to cause more consternation than providing.
So it sounds like you've already thought about this. What kind of a journey have you been on for this?
So, okay. So getting married, at least for us, I think that was, I was fresh out of college. I remember graduating college in May. I got my big boy job in June, as already an intern, but then full-time office work in June. And, I was, married by July. So at least for me, it felt like coming out of college, felt almost years apart. Like my world felt totally different. My responsibilities were totally different. It was kind of like a shock to the system. I had to mature real quick myself, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've now got student loans I have to take care of. I've got a wife I have to take care of. We've got apartment bills, all this kind of stuff. I'm outside of mom and dad's reign of influence.
And those bills will go late if you don't take care of them.
Yeah, no, totally. And
there's not someone there to remind you.
Right, yeah. So, I feel very, very fortunate that, my field of study was business, finance, and accounting. So the numbers side of things wasn't the stressful part. But I felt like as an individual, growing up, I was not in tune with my feelings. I felt like, in a lot of ways, I didn't date really until college. I went on a few dates with a few girls in high school and stuff, but it was never anything serious. It was like, yeah, you might be cool. After one or two, I'm like, not interested. So for whatever reason, I just wasn't ready for that until college. And then, we got married. Sophia was when we had her, that was just honestly, relatively easy parenting. I remember the first 3 months was really hard for me to get my head wrapped around that. I didn't have any time off for when we had Sophia. I didn't have any paternity leave then. So just kind of worked, I worked from home then, so it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was one of those, I know a lot of my neighbors, they're a young couple, and they've oh yeah, we're we got 3 months of time off to kind of hang out with our baby and all that. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what that was like. Cause it's just we just kind of, went running. And then, when we had Emmett, our second, that was, there's kind of a lot that went in between there, but just the struggles of not being able to have a kid. My wife's heart was set on having a kid, and then that didn't happen. She had to get on certain medicines, change medicines, and knowing that certain ones have the potential of causing birth defects, all that kind of stuff was a challenge. And then finally got pregnant, everything's looking good, and then that ended up being a super scary pregnancy. So along those lines, wondering oh, is our baby going to even be born? And then I remember that perinatology folks are well, if you'd like to abort, that's an option. And it's one of those when you're he has some of the markers for Down syndrome, and you're okay, how do I even process this information? Right. And then we'd go talk to our other doctor. She's why would they even tell you that? She's yeah, he has one marker And it wasn't like that. So then like there was a heart scare. There are things like that. And so it's like you're kind of dealing with the trauma of that. Then he's born. None of the actual issues that were like raised were even his issue. And then the real one, which was the one that like kind of the PTSD moment here, the culmination cap of the story here was like, oh no, actually he had, sagittal craniosynostosis. So the top part of his brain fused together. And then it's like, that's like traumatized Carlson. It's like neurosurgeon, plastic surgeon, and my kid is in that middle of that paragraph there. And you're like, are they going to survive? And you're in the hospital, it's all nice. They're trying to give you all the things. You meet all the doctors multiple times, all that kind of stuff. And here's this doctor. And here's your social worker. And you're like, why do I have a social worker? Like, trust me, you want one. And it's like that's your process coordinator, and all that kind of stuff. Like, okay, so we have a neurosurgeon, a plastic surgeon, a social worker, then the pediatrician. And by the way, you have the top neurologist in the nation, the top plastic surgeon in the nation, both on the A team together. And it's like, I feel really fortunate, but that also makes it more terrifying. Like, in a sense, because it's like, why? And so me being like, an engineer, pessimist at heart, you don't talk about how you cope with stressful situations. That's when I go into medical overanalyzer mode. I'm not a medical person by heart, but let me tell you, I learned a lot of medical terminology and what things meant.
I'm sure.
But also made it more freaky because then it's like you're reading probabilities of certain surgeries. But and then come surgery day, and it's like you're signing things away. Like, I will not sue the hospital if my child dies. This is a known risk of surgery. And you're like, okay. So I was a wreck after surgery, ironically, and then my wife was a wreck leading up to surgery, and the whole time neither of us could talk to each other, like in a sense, like during this, because it's like if we'd say
just
anything,
wanted to avoid the topic.
it was just like avoid the topic, pretend like nothing's happening, all that. So that was kind of that. So in this whole thing, I'd say personality types, I would say prior to having kids, I was totally the super optimistic person. I myself am kind of it's a miracle that I'm alive. We'll save that one for another medical story,
teaser.
In a sense, so, but I kind of survived my medical things. And so it's kind of like a great irony of the world that we live in, that my son also had major medical issues. So I kind of felt like
that's great.
That gave me a good bond with my parents, in that sense, being like, oh, okay, I can understand all the horrible feelings that you guys dealt with.
Yeah.
Talk to my dad, Dad, how'd you even deal with this? That's super scary stuff. Right. So,
and it's nice that he's able to help you in that situation too, to give you some guidance in that. So that's a huge blessing there. I mean, in a strange way, right?
Yeah. In a strange way, there was some similarities, but in other ways it was it was so far away from them. They were also 30 odd years removed from those situations. So it was kind of also one of those of
oh yeah, it was fine.
Yeah. It was oh, we remember it was bad and you're in the hospital for a bit, but you were fine. And then my mom's also naturally just I think she compensates for stress by being always optimistic. And that's to a fault too. So it's one of those, So you want to talk about personality traits. I think it made me a lot more, for about 2 years after surgeries, definitely made me more pessimistic on a lot of medical things, being nah, life's not always peaches and cream type of thing. But it also kind of gave me a compassion for other people. Cause our kid it was traumatizing for us what he went through. What actually really got me was realizing that other people go through the same thing, and a lot of them go through it a lot worse than we do. And so that was the hardest part for me, because it's a human can only emotionally endure so much pain in one moment, but then when you realize it's not just you, it's other people times 1,000 or 1,000,000, it's just moral, it kind of breaks you inside. So that was kind of a personality thing there.
Wow.
And then it also kind of made me realize, I'm man, the type of work that I do is it feels so trivial at times. Why am I stressing about this or that or the other thing? It's yeah, exactly. It's oh, okay. That's what, people are stressed out about. Because I remember when I was working in the automotive industry, it's people are oh, this is a catastrophe. The website's down or whatever. And it's now I look at that I got stressed out over the website being down for a half hour or whatever. Who cares? Yes, we're losing money. Okay. I'll admittedly, yes, we're losing money. Yes, it looks bad. But on the flip side, it's no one's actually dying. If our thing is having problems, okay, you have to maybe pick up the phone and call a car dealership. Really? That was the worst case scenario. They could have Googled it instead of going directly through the website. Like, I don't think that was worth cussing up absolutely every other person, myself included, for that type of thing. So I think it's been good, like from maybe like a working in the industry management standpoint. I'm like, it's given me a better perspective on what actually is a priority and what's not.
Interesting.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, personality types. Thanks again for listening to Adhocracy. We'll try
Yeah.
and keep these episodes coming.
Yep.
I think so. We got a couple links we got to put in, and other
We
than
do.
that, see you next time.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think we got this was kind of a fun one. We went all over the place.
Yes.
It was a good
Bit
one.
of Adhocracy.
Adhocracy. So, thanks again.